This is the tale of the Blue Falcon. Let us be off. Away we go. There was once a young prince who was an excellent hunter. One day he was riding about on horseback, this way and that way, but no meat was to be had, not anywhere in the hills or the valleys between. All at once he heard a whirring of wings, and there swooped down from out of the sky a blue falcon. Well, the prince fit an arrow to his bowstring and let it fly, but all he managed to do was knock a single blue feather out of the falcon's tail. Well, he brought this blue feather back to his home, where he showed his father the king and his stepmother the queen. Now his stepmother developed a powerful longing to have this marvelous creature for herself. I must get the blue falcon, she thought. And so, turning the blue feather this way and that way between her fingers, she said to the prince, I am setting it as crosses and as spells and as the decay of the year on you, that you will wander this way and that way about the land. Sick and tired will you feel, and never without a puddle in your shoe, until you bring the blue falcon back to me. Well, the prince looked at his stepmother and said right back to her, and I am setting it as crosses and as spells and as the decay of the year on you, that you will be standing with one foot on the castle tower and one foot on the great house, and with your face to the tempest winds until I return. The spells had been uttered, and there was no revoking them. The prince rode off at once in search of the blue falcon, while his stepmother, the queen, stood high atop the castle and the great house, with her face to the tempest winds. The prince rode this way and that, but no sign of the blue falcon did he see. At last, night fell. He sat down under a tree with his head in his hands and moaned. Just then, there was a rustling in the bushes, and out popped a fox. The fox bowed low to the prince and said, I know what it is you seek. You are after the blue falcon. That I am, said the prince. Can you help me? I might be of service to you, said the talking fox. The blue falcon is the possession of the giant with 5 heads and 5 humps and 5 throttles. You must go to him and pretend that you wish to be taken into his service. Say that you will tend his sheep, and tend his cows, and tend his chickens. When you take good care of all his animals, he shall be fooled into thinking that you are a trustworthy young lad. Then he'll give you the blue falcon to watch over. And when he's gone out, you may take the blue falcon, but be warned, if any part of the blue falcon's body, even its wing tip, touches anything in the giant's house, you'll be sorry indeed. That was what the talking fox said. The prince thanked him. The fox showed him which way to go down the path, and eventually he came to the home of the giant with the 5 heads and 5 humps and 5 throttles. He knocked at the door, and the giant opened it and said, "Well, what would a little slip of a lad like you want in a place like this?" "If it please you," said the prince, "perhaps I can be of service. I'll tend your sheep, I'll tend your cows, I'll tend your chickens." "Very well," said the giant. "Come in." The prince was as good as his word. He tended the sheep, he tended the cows, he tended the chickens. After a time, the giant began to think to himself, "This is a lad that I might trust with the care and keeping of the Blue Falcon." And so he did. When the giant was out, the prince put the Blue Falcon on his wrist and headed for the door. But just then, the Blue Falcon stretched its wings, and one wing tip brushed against the doorpost. The doorpost let out an ear-splitting screech, and the giant came running from afar and grabbed the Blue Falcon and said, "So you tried to deceive me." "Please forgive me," said the prince, and he explained the spell that his stepmother had put on him. "I'll give you the Blue Falcon," said the giant, "if you go to the home of the 7 big women and bring me back the white glaive of light." The prince went back to where the talking fox was waiting for him. "I already know you have failed," said the talking fox, "and that the giant has sent you to the home of the 7 big women to fetch for him the white glaive of light." "He has," said the prince. "Very well then," said the fox. "The white glaive of light is a marvelous sword, as sharp as anything. The 7 big women won't give it up easily. You must go to them and say that you have a skill with metal, that you can polish copper and iron and steel until they gleam. When you have been in their service for the while, the 7 big women will entrust you with the white glaive of light. Then you may put it into its sheath and bring it back to me. But be warned, if you let so much as the sword point, if you let any part of the scabbard touch anything in the home of the 7 big women on your way out, you will be sorry." That was what the talking fox said. The prince promised that he would obey orders more carefully this time. The talking fox showed him which way to go, and the prince walked up the path until he had reached the home of the 7 big women. He knocked at the door, and the 7 big women opened it. "What do you want, you pasty young boy?" said the 7 big women. "If it please you," said the prince, "I have a skill with metal. I can polish copper and steel and iron until they gleam." "In that case," said the 7 big women, "perhaps you can be of service to us." They took him in, and the prince was as good as his word. He polished and polished and polished until all the metal in the home of the 7 big women shone like the noonday sun. And the 7 big women began to whisper to each other, "Perhaps this is a young man who can be trusted with the white glaive of light." They then gave him the great sword to clean, And one day, when the 7 big women were out, he put the sword into its sheath and headed for the door. But the point of the sheath brushed against the door jamb, which let out a deafening howl. Well, the 7 big women came running from afar, and they ripped the white glaive of light from the prince's hands. The prince fell at their feet and begged them for mercy. And when he had told them the tale of his stepmother's curse, they said, "Very well, we'll give you the white glaive of light if you bring us the yellow filly of the King of Ireland." The prince went back to the talking fox, who said, "I already know that you have failed, and that the 7 big women have sent you after the yellow bay filly of the King of Ireland." The prince nodded his head. "In that case, let us go there together. I will turn into a great ship that will bring us to Ireland." And the talking fox turned into a great ship. The prince stepped aboard, and off they sailed. When they had reached the coast of Ireland, the prince stepped off the boat, which turned back into the talking fox. "Now listen carefully," said the fox, "and listen better this time than you have before. Go and put yourself in the service of the King of Ireland, and say that you have a great skill with horses. When you've cared for all the king's horses, he will entrust you with the yellow filly. Then, when no one is around, you may saddle and bridle the filly and bring her away with you. But see that no part of the filly touches the stable wall. If even the tip of her tail brushes against the wall, woe betide you." The prince promised that he would listen better this time, and off he went to the home of the King of Ireland, where he got into the king's service after promising to care for the horses in the stable. Well, he did just that. He brushed their coats, and he brushed their manes, and you'd never seen such healthy horses. Now the King of Ireland said, "Perhaps this is a young man who could care for my prize horse, the yellow filly." When the prince had cared for the yellow filly for some time, and no one else was around, he put the saddle and the bridle on her, and carefully began to lead her out of the stable. But before they had left, the yellow filly's tail began to twitch, and just when they had nearly passed out of the gate, the filly's tail touched the gatepost. The gatepost gave an almighty bellow, and the King of Ireland came running. He wrenched the reins of the yellow filly from the prince's hand, and the prince had no choice but to tell his sorry tale. The King of Ireland said, "Very well, I'll give you the yellow filly if you bring me the daughter of the King of France." The prince went back to the talking fox, who said, "I already know that you have failed, and that the King of Ireland has sent you after the daughter of the King of France. I will turn back into the great ship. Climb aboard." The prince did so, and was quickly carried over the waves to France. The prince disembarked, and the ship turned back into the talking fox, and said, "Listen carefully. You must go up to the home of the king, and tell them that your ship has run aground. The royal family will come down to investigate. Just let me do the rest, and see that you are on board at the same time as the king's daughter." The prince went up to the royal home and told everyone that he had been shipwrecked, that his boat had run aground. The king and the queen and their daughter, the princess, came down to the shoreline to see his boat. They were entranced by it, for never had they seen one like it before. "May I go on board?" asked the princess. The prince nodded. She went on, and the prince followed close behind her. Then there came a strange music that sounded to the princess as though it was echoing from below the deck. So the princess went down below the deck, and the prince followed her. She went this way and that way, but always the music seemed to be coming from a different room inside the ship. Then, at last, the music sounded like it had floated to the upper deck, so the princess went above. But by that time, the ship was far out in the middle of the ocean. She rounded on the prince in fury. "What is this trick you've played on me?" she demanded. The prince told her everything. "And now," he said, "I must bring you back to the home of the King of Ireland." "If truth be told," she said, "you don't seem so bad. I'd rather have you for a husband than the King of Ireland." "Me?" said the prince. "You," said the princess. "But what can we do? You'll never get the yellow filly unless you bring me to the King of Ireland." When the boat landed on the coast of Ireland, it turned back into the talking fox. The fox said, "You wait here, princess." Then he turned to the prince and said, "Behold." The fox changed shape until he had taken human form and looked exactly like the daughter of the King of France. "Bring me up to the King of Ireland. Give me to him, and he will think that I am the princess. Then he'll give you the yellow filly." "But won't you come back with me?" said the prince. "Never mind that. Just wait down by the shore and be ready." Well, the prince went to the home of the King of Ireland with the fox, in the guise of the Princess of France, in tow. The exchange was made, and the prince got the yellow filly. Well, the King of Ireland led what he thought was the Princess of France into his bedchamber. But before another moment had passed, the princess sprang on him with fox-like agility and beat him and tore at him and left him cowering and quivering on the bedchamber floor. Then the fox turned back into itself and sprang out the window and ran down, down, down to the shore, where it turned again into the great ship. The prince and the princess led the yellow filly onto the ship, and away they went over the waters until they came back to the place where the 7 big women lived. They got off the ship, which turned back into the talking fox. "Now then," said the talking fox, "watch this." The fox changed shape until it looked exactly like the yellow filly. "Lead me to the home of the 7 big women, and they will give you the white glaive of light," said the fox. "But won't you come back with me?" said the prince. "Never you mind," said the fox. "Just wait here and be ready." The prince led the fox in the appearance of the yellow filly up to the home of the 7 big women. The change was made. The 7 women gave him the white glaive of light, and the prince went away. The 7 big women were delighted to see what they thought was the yellow filly. They climbed onto its back, first one, and then the next, until all 7 of the women were mounted. Then they rode this way and that, all around the paths and through fields and up and over hills and higher and higher and higher and on to a great rocky crag. And when the filly, who was really the fox, came to the edge of the rocky crag, it came to a sudden screeching halt and bucked its hindquarters up in the air, and the 7 big women were flung over the edge, and they vanished in the mists below. The filly tossed its head and turned back into the talking fox. The fox scampered down until it met up with the prince and the princess, who now had the yellow filly and the white glaive of light. They made their way back to the home of the giant with the 5 heads and 5 humps and 5 throttles. The fox turned into the white glaive of light and bade the prince carry him up to the giant's home. The prince, who knew well enough to listen by now, carried the white sword, which was really the fox, to the giant. The change was made. The giant got the glaive, and the prince got the Blue Falcon. When the prince had gone away, the giant took the sword from its sheath and began swinging it this way and that. Well, he practiced and practiced and practiced his swordplay. But the fox, in the guise of the sword, suddenly gave a twist and lopped off all 5 of the giant's heads. The heads and the body fell to the ground. The white glaive of light turned back into the fox. The fox scampered back to meet the prince and the princess, who now had the yellow filly, the white glaive of light, and the Blue Falcon besides. Back they went, back toward the prince's home. "You must go on ahead," said the fox, when they had gotten near. "When you are almost home, your stepmother will look down from her high perch, where she has been the entire time since you left her. Her evil eye will fix you with a terrible glare and turn you into a bundle of firewood." "But how can I avoid this terrible curse?" asked the prince. "Easy," said the talking fox. "Take the white glaive of light with you. Hold it between your eyes, and you shall be protected." Well, the prince did just that. He advanced toward his home, carefully keeping the white glaive of light between his eyes. His stepmother saw him coming. She looked down with her terrible evil eye, and fixed him with a burning stare. But the spell rebounded from the blade of the white glaive of light, and the stepmother herself was transformed into a bundle of firewood, which plummeted down from the tower top and landed with a thud at the prince's feet. The prince set fire to the bundle of wood at once, and it burned away to cinders. The prince was powerfully grateful, as you can imagine, and said to the talking fox, "What do you wish? Anything at all, and I will give it to you. You may roam about my lands, eating the meat of any animal that you wish." "There is no need for that," said the talking fox. "Meat I'll get anywhere and any time I choose. Live a good life, O prince." And with those words, the talking fox leapt away and was gone. The prince and the princess were married, and for years to come, all who knew them rejoiced in their happiness and told each other with delight of the wonders of the yellow filly and the white glaive of light, and of course, the blue falcon.